The evening sky over the small Atlanta neighborhood was painted in shades of gold and gray, the kind of sky that made everything look tired yet beautiful. The streets were quiet, lined with old houses that had seen better days. Some windows were cracked, some doors hung loosely on their hinges, and the faint sound of children playing echoed through the narrow lanes. In one of those small houses lived a boy named Malik, a 12-year-old with big brown eyes and a heart far too kind for his age. Malik's world was simple but heavy. His family didn't have much, no fancy furniture, no expensive toys, and sometimes not even enough food for the day. Still, there was love inside that home, the kind that made you forget hunger for a while. His mother worked hard, taking small jobs like cleaning houses and selling handmade bracelets near the bus stop. She used to say, "We may be poor, but we're not empty, Malik. We have kindness, and that's something money can't buy." Malik always believed her. Their house had just 2 rooms, one for sleeping and one that served as the kitchen, dining area, and living space. The walls were faded, and the roof leaked when it rained. But Malik thought it was cozy. Every morning, sunlight slipped through the broken curtain and landed on his face. Waking him up before the alarm did, he would stretch, smile, and whisper a small prayer before starting his day. Malik loved going to school. Not because it was easy. In fact, it was the opposite. He often walked there barefoot because his shoes had holes, and sometimes the other kids laughed. But Malik didn't let it break him. He walked with his head held high. His teacher once said he had an old soul, and maybe she was right. He never complained, never asked for pity. He just did his best and believed that one day things would change. When school ended, Malik would rush home not to play games or rest, but to help his mother. Together they sat by the street corner, their small wooden table filled with colorful bracelets made from old strings and beads. People rarely stopped to buy, but Malik always smiled and greeted everyone kindly. Sometimes, just seeing his bright smile made people pause and hand him a few coins. It wasn't much, but for Malik and his family it meant dinner. There were nights when the cupboards were almost empty, and the sound of Malik's sister's stomachs growling filled the silence. His mother tried to hide her sadness behind her smile. "We'll be fine," she'd whisper, hugging them tightly. "God is watching," Malik would nod, pretending not to notice her watery eyes. He knew she was strong, but he also knew how heavy that strength was. Despite everything, Malik found beauty in small things. He loved the smell of rain on dusty roads, the sound of his sister's laughter, and the glow of the old lamp that lit their room. He often sat by the window, dreaming. He dreamed of becoming someone important, not for fame, but so he could give his mother everything she ever wanted. He didn't wish for riches or cars, just enough so she would never have to worry again. One afternoon, Malik walked back from school, his stomach empty since morning. He had given his lunch to his little sister before leaving home, saying he wasn't hungry. But the truth was he was starving still. He smiled when he reached home and saw his mother waiting at the door. She hugged him tightly as if trying to protect him from the world. Their days were repetitive, yet filled with quiet courage. Malik had seen kids his age steal or give up, but he refused to lose his goodness every morning. He reminded himself that being kind was his only strength. "When you give," his mother always said, "you never truly lose." He carried those words like a shield, even when the world seemed unfair. On weekends, Malik sometimes went to the park near their neighborhood. Not to play, but to watch other kids, he sat on the old bench, eating whatever small snack he had saved from the day before. His eyes sparkled with wonder. He didn't envy them. Instead, he imagined himself there someday, running freely without worry. His imagination was his only luxury, but deep down, Malik knew something in his life was about to change. He couldn't explain it, but there was a quiet feeling inside him, like life was preparing him for something bigger. He didn't know that a simple act of kindness, something he'd do without thinking, would one day change everything for him and his family. That evening, the sunset dipped low behind the buildings, painting the sky with deep orange light. Malik sat on his porch, his school bag beside him, watching people pass by, some in cars, some on bikes, some walking with heavy steps like his mother. He thought about how different everyone's life seemed, yet how everyone carried something unseen. Hope, pain, love, or loneliness. As the cool wind brushed his face, Malik looked at the pot of rice his mother had left cooling on the small wooden table. It was their last meal for the weekend. But he didn't know that sharing it would lead to a miracle. That night, as stars began to appear in the dark sky, Malik whispered softly, "Maybe tomorrow will be better." His voice was small but full of faith. And somewhere in that quiet street, life listened, ready to surprise the boy who believed in kindness more than anything else. Malik's mornings began before the sun had fully risen. The soft light that peeked through the torn curtain painted golden lines across the small, crowded room. His mother, Amina, was usually awake before him, boiling water on the tiny stove that sometimes worked and sometimes didn't. The smell of old wood and faint smoke filled the air, mixed with the sound of her quiet humming. It was her way of keeping hope alive, even when there was barely anything to eat. Malik would rise from his thin mattress, rubbing his sleepy eyes, and glance at his two younger sisters, Leela and Mariam, still fast asleep beside him. He smiled every morning when he saw them. They were his reason for everything, the light that made even the hardest days bearable. Sometimes he wished he could give them a better childhood, one filled with toys, warm meals, and laughter that didn't have to hide sadness. Their house was small, built long ago and never repaired properly. The walls were peeling, the roof leaked whenever it rained, and the floorboards creaked under every step. But Amina kept it clean and warm, she often said. A poor home can still have pride. Malik, he believed her, and so he helped, sweeping the floor and fetching water from the nearby tap every morning. After washing his face in cold water, Malik would quickly put on his worn-out uniform. The shirt had been washed so many times it had lost its color, and the pants were patched in 2 places. His shoes were almost falling apart, but he still shined them with a bit of cooking oil, smiling at his reflection in the water bucket. "Looking sharp," he'd say to himself, trying to start the day with courage. Breakfast on most days was just tea. No sugar, no bread, just plain black tea to warm their stomachs before school. Amina would gently touch Malik's shoulder and say, "Study hard, my son. Knowledge is your way out of this life." Malik nodded every time, not because he understood how, but because he believed her words carried truth. The walk to school was long, nearly 40 minutes each way, but Malik didn't mind. He liked the journey, the sound of birds, the chatter of people opening their small shops, and the way sunlight danced across the cracked pavements. He often greeted the shopkeepers with a smile, and though most were too busy to reply, he never stopped trying. Malik believed that kindness was free, and maybe, someday it would come back to him. School wasn't easy. The other children noticed his torn clothes and sometimes laughed. They called him names, whispered behind his back, and made fun of his lunch, or lack of it. Malik tried to ignore it, keeping his head down, but deep inside he wished someone would see him for who he was. Not the poor boy, but a boy with dreams. He loved learning, especially stories. He listened with shining eyes when his teacher spoke about great inventors, brave leaders, and people who changed the world with small actions. Sometimes he wondered if he could be one of them too. At lunch, while other kids opened sandwiches and fruit boxes, Malik quietly took out his small metal tin. Inside were a few bites of rice or a piece of bread. Sometimes there was nothing on those days. He would just drink water and pretend he wasn't hungry. He didn't like pity. He only wanted understanding. Still, he never stopped smiling, even when his stomach ached. When school ended, Malik hurried home, dropping his bag on the floor and helping his mother. Together they sat by the roadside under the hot afternoon sun. Amina laid out her handmade bracelets on a cloth, bright red, blue and yellow beads strung together carefully. Malik had learned how to make them too. His small hands worked quickly, his eyes focused. He often told his mother, "One day I'll sell so many of these that we'll never be hungry again." She smiled, kissed his forehead and whispered, "You already give me everything." My son, evenings were their quiet time. After the sun went down and the streets grew dark, they would gather around the little table for dinner. Sometimes it was rice, sometimes just soup, sometimes nothing but laughter and stories. Malik liked those moments. He would listen to his mother talk about her childhood, about how she used to climb mango trees and chase her brothers in the village before life became so hard. It reminded him that happiness didn't always depend on what you had, but on who you shared it with. On good days, when they managed to sell a few bracelets, Malik would buy candies for his sisters. He loved watching their faces light up. Lila would dance around the room while Mariam clapped her tiny hands. The joy of those moments was enough to make him forget his empty stomach. But there were also bad days, days when it rained and no one bought anything, Days when Amina came home exhausted, her eyes swollen with tears she tried to hide. Malik always pretended not to see. Instead, he'd hug her tightly and whisper, "We'll be okay, Mama." He didn't have money, but he had faith, and somehow that was enough to keep them going. Every night before bed, Malik would look at the cracked ceiling and imagine stars shining through it. He'd think about the people who had everything, big houses, warm beds, full plates, and wonder if they ever felt thankful. He didn't envy them. He just hoped they remembered to be kind, because kindness was something he could still afford. Even when he had nothing else, life in that small house was hard, yes, but it was filled with quiet love and stubborn hope. And deep down, Malik carried something precious, the belief that small acts of good could make a big difference. He didn't know it yet, but that belief was about to be tested in a way that would change not only his life, but the lives of everyone around him. The sun had barely risen when Malik woke up that Friday morning. He could tell by the heaviness in the air that something felt different. The room was quiet, too quiet. His sisters were still asleep, and his mother sat by the table staring at an empty bowl. Her hands were clasped tightly, and there were dark circles under her eyes. Malik rubbed his eyes and asked softly, "Mama, what's wrong?" She looked at him, trying to smile, but her voice trembled as she said, "We don't have anything left to cook." "My son." For a moment, Malik just stood there, silent. He looked around the small kitchen, the empty shelves, the old pot sitting on the stove, and the single bag of rice that was almost finished. It hit him. This was all they had left. He felt his stomach twist with hunger. But what hurt more was seeing the worry on his mother's face. Amina sighed and reached for the last handful of rice. She poured it into the pot, adding water and salt, trying to stretch it enough for everyone. It was barely enough for one meal, but she made it anyway. She turned to Malik and said softly, "This is all we have for the weekend." "We'll have to make it last," Malik nodded, pretending not to be scared, but deep down he was. When Lila and Miriam woke up, they came running to the table, their eyes bright with hunger and hope. Malik helped his mother serve the small portions carefully, just enough for everyone to taste. Not enough to fill. As he looked at his bowl, half empty before he even began eating, he smiled and said, "It's delicious, Mama." Even though it wasn't, Amina smiled back, tears glistening in her eyes after breakfast. Malik stepped outside to get some air. The neighborhood looked the same as always, dusty streets, barking dogs, and the distant noise of cars. But that day everything felt heavier. The world seemed too big, too unfair. He watched people walking by with shopping bags and full bellies. While his family didn't even know what they'd eat tomorrow, he sat down on the front steps of their small house thinking. His stomach growled, but his thoughts were louder. He wished he could fix things, wished he could find a way to help his mother. Just as he was lost in thought, he noticed someone across the street. A man sat near the old streetlight, his clothes torn, his shoes missing, and his head bowed. He looked weak, tired, and forgotten by the world. Malik watched him for a long time. The man didn't move much, except to pull his thin jacket tighter against the cold breeze. Something in Malik's heart began to stir. He didn't know the man, didn't know his story, but he recognized that look, the look of someone who had gone too long without food or kindness. Malik looked back at his home, then down at the small metal plate he still held in his hands. Inside it was his unfinished portion of rice. It wasn't much, but it was something. His first thought was hesitation. If he gave this food away, there would be nothing left for him. His mother had already warned him that there was no more rice for tomorrow. But then, as he watched the man cough quietly, Malik's decision became clear. He stood up, took a deep breath, and crossed the street. The man didn't notice him at first. His eyes were half closed. Lost somewhere between exhaustion and hopelessness, Malik stopped beside him and said softly, "Excuse me, sir." The man looked up slowly, his eyes tired and sunken. Malik held out the plate and said, "I have some food. You can have it." For a few seconds, the man just stared at him, as if trying to understand what he was hearing. His lips trembled. "And are you sure, son?" he asked. Malik nodded. "Yes, I'm sure." "Please take it." The man's hand shook as he reached for the plate. He looked at Malik with disbelief, his eyes filling with tears. "You're giving me your food?" he whispered. Malik smiled shyly. "It's okay, sir. You look like you need it more than me." The man took a bite, then another. Each bite seemed to bring him back to life. He looked at Malik again and said, "What's your name?" Malik, the boy replied. The man nodded slowly, repeating the name under his breath like it meant something. Thank you, Malik. You don't know what this means to me. Malik sat with him for a while. Just talking, he learned that the man's name was Mr. Williams. He had once worked in a small factory but lost his job, then his home, and eventually, everyone he cared about. Life had been unkind. He had been walking for days without food. Malik listened quietly, his young heart breaking at every word. When the sky began to darken, Malik stood up and said, I have to go now, but I'll see you again. The man smiled weakly and nodded. You're a good boy, Malik, don't ever change. Malik walked back home, his stomach empty but his heart strangely full. He didn't know why, but he felt lighter. That night, as he lay in bed, his mother asked, Did you eat, my son? Malik hesitated, then said, Yes, Mama. I did. She smiled, unaware that her little boy had gone hungry so someone else could eat. Malik turned toward the window, watching the stars flicker faintly, and whispered to himself, Maybe kindness is food too. He didn't know that the man he helped, the one he shared his last meal with, would soon return to change everything. His one act of compassion had already started something extraordinary, something neither hunger nor hardship could ever take away. That night the house was darker than usual. The single bulb that hung from the ceiling flickered weakly, casting soft shadows across the room. Malik lay on his thin mattress, listening to the sound of his mother's quiet breathing and his sister's soft snores. His stomach rumbled, but he tried to ignore it. He closed his eyes, remembering the face of the man he had fed, the way his eyes filled with gratitude, and the quiet thank you that had trembled from his lips. But as the hours passed, hunger began to whisper louder than kindness. His belly felt empty and tight, like it was folding in on itself. He turned on his side, trying to sleep, but sleep refused to come. He thought about the small portion of rice he had given away, and though a small part of him wished he hadn't, another part, the bigger, truer part, felt proud. Morning came too soon. The weak light slipped through the broken curtain, painting soft lines on the cracked wall. Malik's head felt heavy, his body tired. He got up quietly, not wanting to wake his mother, and splashed cold water on his face. His reflection in the tin bowl looked older somehow, his eyes tired but determined. When his mother woke, she looked pale. Her voice was gentle, but Malik could hear the worry behind it. We'll have to make it through today somehow, she said. I'll go look for work again. Maybe someone needs cleaning or cooking done. Malik nodded. I'll help, Mama, she smiled faintly, brushing his hair with her fingers. You're already helping, my love. They spent the morning searching, moving from door to door, asking quietly if anyone needed help. Most people shook their heads, some didn't even answer. The world seemed too busy for the poor, too cold for kindness by noon. The sun was burning hot and Malik's legs ached. His mother's scarf was soaked in sweat. Still, she didn't give up. She whispered prayers under her breath as they walked. They stopped by the bus station, hoping to sell a few bracelets, but no one was buying. The city seemed impatient that day. Everyone was rushing, their eyes glued to their phones, wallets clutched tightly. Malik's mother held the bracelets up anyway, calling softly, handmade, beautiful. Just a few dollars, but people just passed, not even glancing. Malik sat quietly beside her, his throat dry. He hadn't eaten since yesterday, and his body was beginning to feel weak. He tried not to show it. He didn't want his mother to worry. Maybe tomorrow will be better, he said softly. She smiled, but her eyes said she wasn't sure. As the evening approached, they walked back home with empty hands. The streetlights flickered on one by one, casting long shadows on the road. Malik's little sisters ran to greet them, their faces full of joy, even though there was nothing to eat. Amina hugged them tightly, hiding her tears behind a smile. That night, Malik sat by the window again. The sky was clear, the stars sharp and bright. He could hear his mother's quiet sobs from the next room. She thought he was asleep. He wasn't. He sat there, staring at the stars, whispering to them, "Please, just one chance, that's all we need." Hunger had a way of testing a person's soul. It made people desperate, angry, even cruel. But Malik refused to let it change him. He remembered what his mother always said. Even in darkness, you must keep your light. He held on to that thought like a rope, keeping him from falling. The next morning he woke up feeling dizzy. He almost fell when he stood. His mother noticed and rushed to his side. "You didn't eat anything yesterday, did you?" she asked. Malik forced a smile. I'm fine, Mama. But she could see the truth. She pulled him into her arms, whispering, You shouldn't have given away your food. My boy. Her voice trembled with a mix of pride and pain. You're too kind for this world. Malik looked at her and said, But Mama, that man needed it more than I did. I couldn't just watch him suffer. Amina closed her eyes and held him tighter. Your heart is pure, she whispered. But it hurts me to see you hungry. For the next 2 days, they survived on water and faith. Malik helped his mother fix old bracelets. Trying to keep her spirits high, he told stories to his sisters. Pretending everything was fine, he made them laugh, even when his own lips trembled with exhaustion. He didn't want them to see the pain. On the 3rd day, Malik woke up weak but hopeful. He went outside, hoping maybe someone had dropped a coin or left food near the bins. As he searched the dusty street, his heart sank. There was nothing. Not even crumbs. He sat down on the curb, his vision blurry, and whispered, Maybe I was foolish. But just as those words left his mouth, he heard a familiar voice call out, Malik! He turned, blinking against the light. And there stood Mr. Williams, the same man he had fed, only now he looked different. His clothes were cleaner, his face brighter. He was holding a small bag in his hand. Malik blinked in disbelief. You came back, he said softly. Mr. Williams smiled. Of course I did. I told you I wouldn't forget. He walked closer, holding out the bag. I brought something for you and your family. Malik stared, speechless. Inside the bag were fruits, bread, and even some milk. Tears filled his eyes. But how? He asked. Mr. Williams sat beside him. Let's just say life gave me another chance, and I couldn't take it without giving you one too. Malik didn't know it then, but that moment marked the end of his hardest struggle and the beginning of something beautiful. The boy who gave his last meal out of kindness was about to receive more than he ever imagined. His struggle had not been in vain. It had been the test before the miracle. When Malik saw Mr. Williams standing there with that small bag of food, it felt like a dream. For a moment, he didn't even move, afraid that if he blinked, the man would disappear. The sun was warm on their faces. The wind carried the smell of fresh bread from the bag, and Malik's heart began to race. Mr. Williams smiled gently, the lines on his face softer than before. You didn't think I'd forget you, did you? He said, his voice calm but full of warmth. Malik shook his head, still speechless. The man placed the bag in his hands. You gave me your last meal, boy. The least I can do is make sure you never go hungry again. Malik's throat tightened as he looked inside. Bread, apples, rice, even a small bottle of milk. It felt like a feast, his eyes filled with tears. Thank you, sir, he whispered. Mr. Williams put a hand on his shoulder. Don't thank me yet, Malik. This is only the beginning. They walked together toward Malik's small home. The streets were quiet, just the sound of their footsteps and the soft rustle of the grocery bag. When they reached the door, Malik called out, Mama, come see. Amina stepped outside, surprised to see the man standing beside her son. This is Mr. Williams, Malik said proudly. He's the man I told you about. Amina's eyes widened. She immediately invited him in, her voice filled with gratitude. Please come inside, sir. Mr. Williams smiled politely and followed. Inside, the house was modest but clean. Mr. Williams looked around and nodded. You've kept it well, he said. Amina smiled shyly. It's small, but it's home. Malik placed the bag on the table, and his sisters ran to peek inside. Their faces lit up with joy at the sight of the food. Lila clapped her hands and Miriam giggled. Their laughter filled the room like sunlight. Mr. Williams watched quietly, his eyes softening. He remembered his own family, the wife he had lost, the home that had once been filled with the same sound of innocent laughter. For the first time in years, he felt something heal inside him over the next few minutes. They shared the food. Amina cooked quickly, and the smell of warm bread and rice filled the house. Malik handed Mr. Williams a plate, but the man refused. Not this time, son, today. I'll watch you eat. Malik hesitated, then took a small bite. The taste brought tears to his eyes, not because of the food itself, but because of what it meant. After the meal, Mr. Williams sat quietly, his gaze lost in thought. Finally, he spoke. I used to be someone. You know, he said softly. I ran a small business, had a wife, a home, everything a man could ask for. But when my wife passed away, I lost my way. I stopped caring, stopped living, and before I knew it, everything was gone. His voice trembled. No one helped me, no one even looked at me. Until you did, Malik listened, his young heart heavy. Amina sat beside them, nodding slowly. Life can be cruel, she said gently. But it can also be kind when you least expect it. Mr. Williams smiled. Yes, and that's why I'm here. I can't change my past. But I can change someone else's future. He looked at Malik. You reminded me what it means to be human, so I want to help. If you'll let me, Amina was stunned. Help us, she asked softly. Mr. Williams nodded. I don't have much left, but I still have friends, old business partners, people who owe me favors. I can find you work. Maybe help fix this place up. Tears welled up in Amina's eyes. Sir, you don't have to, but he interrupted kindly. I want to. He turned to Malik. And as for you, young man, I think someone like you deserves more than struggle. You have a good heart, and the world needs more of that. From that day forward, Mr. Williams became part of their lives. He visited every few days, sometimes with groceries, sometimes just to talk. He helped Amina write a small letter to one of his old contacts, the owner of a local store, asking if she could work there. Within a week she had a job. It wasn't much, but it was honest work. And for the first time in a long time, she came home with a smile that reached her eyes. Malik couldn't believe it. He watched his mother leave for work every morning, her steps lighter, her shoulders straighter. She started humming again while cooking. The house began to feel alive. Mr. Williams also helped Malik. He brought him new notebooks, pencils, and even a pair of shoes that actually fit. You can't chase dreams barefoot, he said with a grin. Malik laughed for the first time in weeks, but beyond all the gifts, what Malik cherished most was the time they spent talking. They'd sit outside in the evenings watching the sky fade into purple and orange. Mr. Williams told stories about his youth, about hope, loss, and redemption. Malik listened like every word was a treasure. One evening, as they sat together, Mr. Williams said something Malik would never forget. Sometimes, Malik, when you give from your heart, the world gives back in ways you can't imagine. Malik nodded quietly. He finally understood what his mother always meant when she said kindness was never wasted. Days turned into weeks, and the family's life slowly began to change. There was food on the table, laughter in the air, and hope where there used to be fear. Amina often looked at Malik and whispered, Your kindness brought him to us, and Malik would smile, remembering that night when he had given away his last meal. He didn't realize it then, but that small act had changed everything. For him, for his family, and even for the stranger who had once been broken. The turning point had come quietly, like a whisper from fate reminding everyone that sometimes miracles don't arrive in lightning or thunder, but in the gentle hands of kindness. Days turned into weeks, and weeks began to bloom into months. The little house that once echoed with hunger and silence now carried the warmth of laughter and purpose. Malik's mother, Amina, left home every morning with a small smile on her lips and hope in her eyes. She had started working at a local grocery store. Thanks to Mr. Williams' help, her job wasn't easy, but it filled her with pride. For the first time in years, she was earning enough to keep food on the table. Malik would watch her leave from the doorstep, clutching his school bag. He would wave until she turned the corner. Then he'd grab his sister's hands and say, Let's get ready. Mama's making a new life for us. His voice was filled with a confidence that hadn't been there before. Every morning now started with the smell of something cooking. It wasn't always a big breakfast, sometimes just porridge or bread, but it was food, real food. The taste of it reminded Malik that better days were possible. He had learned that miracles didn't always arrive suddenly. Sometimes they came slowly, through effort, patience, and love. At school, Malik's life began to change too. The new shoes Mr. Williams had given him fit perfectly, and the notebooks he brought made Malik feel proud to open his bag. For the first time, he didn't have to hide his hands or pretend he wasn't hungry. The teachers noticed his spark returning, his focus sharper than ever. Malik worked hard, staying after class to ask questions, studying by the dim light of the old lamp at night. He wanted to make something of himself, not just for him, but for his mother. He often whispered to himself, One day, I'll give her everything back. Those words became his promise, his mission. After school, Malik helped around the house. He took care of his sisters, fetched water, and helped his mother with her new routine. But his favorite time of day was evening, when Mr. Williams came by. Sometimes he'd arrive with a small bag of groceries, sometimes with books and sometimes just to sit and talk. He had become more than a helper, more than a friend. He was family. Mr. Williams would often tell Malik stories about life. "You see, Malik," he'd say, "hard times are like storms, they don't last forever. But they teach you how to stand strong." Malik listened carefully, his young heart absorbing every word. One day, Mr. Williams brought something different, a small wooden box filled with tools and beads. "You told me your mother makes bracelets, right?" he asked. Malik nodded eagerly. Mr. Williams smiled. "Then let's make this a business, not just a side job. You and your mother can sell these in the market, and I'll help you get started." Amina couldn't believe it. She had never imagined that her simple craft could become something bigger. Together, they spent the next few days working hard. Mr. Williams helped them design colorful patterns. Malik made signs out of cardboard, and his sisters tied ribbons around the bracelets. When the weekend came, they set up a small stall at the local market. The morning sun was bright, the air buzzing with people. Malik stood proudly beside his mother, calling out to customers with a wide smile. "Handmade bracelets, one made with love," he'd say, and people actually stopped to look. At first only a few bought, but then word began to spread. People liked the story behind their little shop. A boy who once had nothing, now helping his mother build something beautiful. Some came just to see them, others to support them. By the end of the day, their small basket was full of money. Amina's hands trembled as she counted it. Her eyes filling with tears, Malik hugged her and said, "See, Mama, we're getting there." Mr. Williams stood a few feet away, watching them. His heart swelled with pride. He had lost his own family once, but now it felt like he had been given a new one. He had found purpose again as the days went by. Malik's family became known in the neighborhood. People admired their hard work. Their home, once dull and broken, began to look brighter. Amina painted the walls with the little she could save. Malik hung drawings on the wall, and the smell of warm food became a daily blessing. Malik also began helping Mr. Williams whenever he could. Sometimes they would visit community centers or small shops, talking to people about kindness. Mr. Williams often said, "If you want to change the world, start by being kind to one person." Malik always nodded, remembering how one simple meal had changed everything. One evening, as they sat together on the porch, the sun setting behind the rooftops, Mr. Williams looked at Malik and said, "You've grown, boy, not just in height but in heart." Malik smiled. "You taught me that, sir." Mr. Williams chuckled softly. "No, you taught me. You reminded me what it means to care." That night, Malik couldn't sleep. He lay awake thinking about how far they had come. His life had turned from empty plates to full hearts, from hopelessness to dreams. He realized that transformation wasn't magic. It was made from courage, kindness, and people who believed in each other. He thought about the man who had once sat cold and hungry under a streetlight, and the choice he made to share his meal. It was such a small thing, yet it had changed everything. He smiled in the dark, whispering, "Maybe that's how miracles work. They start with something small, and outside, in the quiet of the night, the world seemed to listen. The stars shimmered a little brighter, as if agreeing. The boy who had once given away his last meal was now giving back to life, one act of love at a time. His story was no longer one of survival. It was one of transformation. The months passed quietly, like chapters in a story no one wanted to end. Malik's family had gone from barely surviving to truly living. The air inside their small home no longer carried the smell of emptiness, but the sweet scent of cooked meals, laughter, and dreams taking shape. The once dull walls were painted light blue, and little drawings made by his sisters now hung proudly beside them. They were reminders of how far they had come. Malik's mother, Amina, had become one of the most trusted workers at the grocery store. Her manager often said, "You've got magic in your hands," because every shelf she arranged seemed to sparkle with care. The owner even increased her pay, saying she had earned it with her honesty and hard work. Amina cried that night, holding Malik close, whispering, "This is all because of you, my son." But Malik shook his head. "No, Mama, this is because of us." Their weekends at the market had also become something special. The small bracelet stall that began as a simple table under the sun had now grown into a proper stand with a colorful banner that read, "Heartstrings by Amina and Malik." People loved their bracelets, not just because they were beautiful, but because each one carried a story of hope. Malik would tell customers, "These are made with love and second chances," and they always smiled, some even tearing up. Mr. Williams still visited them often, though his steps had slowed a little. He was older now, but his eyes were brighter than ever. Watching Malik's family thrive filled him with a peace he hadn't felt in years. One afternoon, as they all sat outside, he said quietly, "You know, I used to think my life ended when I lost everything. But you proved me wrong. You showed me that as long as we keep giving, life keeps giving back." Malik listened carefully. His heart full, he had grown taller, his face sharper, but his eyes still held that same kindness. "You gave us a chance when we had nothing," he said. "That means more than I can ever say." Mr. Williams smiled. "You gave first, Malik. I only followed your example." As time went on, the little bracelet business began to grow beyond their small town. One customer who bought from them posted a photo online, and soon people from nearby cities started asking how they could order. Amina didn't understand much about the internet, but a young girl from the market helped them set up a small social page. Orders began to flow in, and for the first time, Amina could save money. Malik used part of that money for school supplies. He even bought a second-hand computer so he could study better. His grades improved rapidly, and soon his teachers noticed. One day, his principal called him to the office and said, "Malik, there's a scholarship program for students who show exceptional character and dedication. I think you should apply." Malik was nervous, but he filled out the form anyway, writing his story with simple honesty. A few weeks later, an envelope arrived in the mail. Malik's hands shook as he opened it. The words printed inside made his eyes widen. "Congratulations. You have been selected for the Community Scholarship Program." He had earned a full scholarship to a better school. It felt unreal. Amina hugged him so tightly that he could barely breathe. "You did it, my boy," she cried. "You're going to have the future you deserve." When Mr. Williams heard the news, he was silent for a long time, then said, "I told you, Malik, when you give from your heart, the world finds a way to give back." His voice trembled slightly, pride mixing with tears. "You've made me believe again." The community soon learned about Malik's story, the boy who had once shared his last meal with a stranger and ended up changing both their lives. People began inviting Malik and his mother to small gatherings and schools to talk about kindness. Amina was shy at first, but Malik always spoke with confidence. "Kindness doesn't need money," he'd say. "Just courage." Mr. Williams helped them even more by introducing Amina to a few people who managed small businesses. Together, they created a tiny charity project where they donated a few bracelets each month to raise funds for families in need. Amina called it the meal that gave back, a name that made Malik smile every time he heard it. Life had truly changed, not through luck or wealth, but through compassion and effort. The boy who once sat on a porch hungry and hopeless was now standing tall, inspiring others to believe in goodness. Malik often walked past the same streetlight where he first saw Mr. Williams that cold night. Sometimes he'd stop there for a few minutes, whispering a quiet thank you to the wind, remembering where it all began one day, as the sun dipped behind the rooftops, painting the sky with shades of pink and gold. Malik found Mr. Williams sitting quietly on the porch. He looked tired but peaceful. Malik sat beside him and said softly, "Do you ever think about how strange it is? One small act changed everything," Mr. Williams chuckled. "That's life, son. Big changes start with small moments." He paused, looking out at the horizon. "You taught me that?" Malik smiled, the breeze playing with his hair. "You gave me hope when I didn't have any," he said. "I think we saved each other." Mr. Williams nodded, his eyes glistening. "Yes, we did, Malik. Yes, we did." As night fell, the sound of laughter drifted from inside the house. Amina and the girls were preparing dinner. The smell of warm food filled the air. Rice, beans, and roasted bread. It wasn't fancy, but it was enough. And in that simple moment, surrounded by love, Malik realized something. True richness wasn't measured in money or things, but in the hearts you touch and the lives you lift. He leaned back, looking at the stars that had once watched him cry. Now they seemed to shine just for him. His story had come full circle. The hungry boy had become a beacon of hope. The stranger he once fed had become family. And the kindness that started it all had grown into something powerful. Something that could feed more than bodies. It could feed souls. Years passed like pages turning in a quiet book. The small boy who once sat hungry under the dim streetlight was no longer the same. Malik had grown into a young man, taller, stronger, and wiser. But what remained unchanged was the kindness in his heart. The same kindness that had once moved him to share his last meal with a stranger. Life had not been easy, but it had been kind to him in its own mysterious way. His family's small bracelet business had grown, now known across several neighborhoods as Heartstrings. They sold not only jewelry but stories of hope, struggle, and miracles born out of generosity. People didn't just buy the bracelets, they carried them as symbols, reminders that even the smallest act of good could change lives. Amina, now radiant with pride, often told customers the story behind the name. "These bracelets are more than colors and beads," she'd say with a soft smile. "They carry the spirit of my son who believed kindness could feed the soul." Her voice would tremble every time, not from sadness but from gratitude. Malik had finished school with distinction, thanks to the scholarship he earned, and now volunteered at the same community program that once helped him. He taught children about compassion, honesty, and courage. He often told them, "The world doesn't always give you what you want, but if you give it your best, it gives back in ways you never expect." The children loved him, not just because of his story, but because of his warmth. Mr. Williams, though older and slower now, remained a part of their family. He had found peace in helping others together with Malik and Amina. He started a small foundation called the Shared Meal Project. Its purpose was simple: to provide food and hope to those who needed it most. Every weekend, they cooked meals and distributed them around the city. Malik often led the team, wearing a simple shirt with the words "Kindness First" printed on the back. Each time Malik handed a meal to someone on the street, he remembered that cold night years ago. He could still see the look in Mr. Williams's eyes. Tired, broken yet filled with quiet gratitude, that memory became his compass, guiding him through every step of his life. One Sunday evening, after finishing a long day of distributing food, Malik and Mr. Williams sat on a park bench, watching the sunset melt into gold and crimson. Mr. Williams's voice was soft when he said, "You know, Malik, I think kindness travels. It doesn't end with one person, it keeps moving, touching others. Like ripples in water." Malik smiled, nodding. "You're right, sir, it's like planting a seed. It grows even where we can't see." Mr. Williams chuckled quietly. "Do you know how many people you've inspired?" Malik laughed shyly. "Not enough yet." The old man smiled. "You've done more than enough, my boy. You've proven that one act of love can outlive us all." Time eventually began to slow for Mr. Williams. His visits grew fewer and his steps weaker, but his heart remained as strong as ever. One evening, as he sat beside Malik, he placed a wrinkled hand on the boy's shoulder and whispered, "Promise me something." Malik looked at him, his chest tightening. "Anything, sir?" Mr. Williams smiled faintly. "Promise me you'll keep giving even when it's hard. Promise you'll teach others to do the same." Malik nodded, his eyes glistening. "I promise." When Mr. Williams passed away a few months later, it felt as though a light had dimmed in the world. The man who had once been saved by a simple meal had left behind a legacy of kindness that could never fade. Malik cried that day, not from sorrow, but from gratitude, because he knew that even in death, Mr. Williams had given him something eternal. At the memorial, Malik stood before a small crowd, holding one of the bracelets they had made together. His voice trembled, but his words were steady. "Mr. Williams taught me that kindness is the only wealth that never runs out. He gave me hope when I had nothing, and I want to spend my life doing the same for others." The people in the crowd nodded, some wiping away tears. After that day, Malik dedicated himself fully to the Shared Meal Project. He traveled to schools, communities, and shelters sharing his story. He spoke not as someone who had been rescued, but as someone who had learned to rescue others. His words reached hearts. His story spread far beyond his city, inspiring countless people to believe in goodness again. One evening, years later, Malik walked past the same old streetlight where it had all begun. It still flickered faintly, just as it did that night when he met the hungry stranger. He stopped for a moment, his heart full of memories. The wind brushed his face, warm and gentle, and he whispered, "We did it, sir. We kept our promise." He looked up at the stars, the same stars that once listened to his prayers, and smiled. They seemed to shine brighter, as if the heavens themselves were proud. Malik realized something in that moment. Life had come full circle. He had been the boy who gave, and now he was the man who gave back. He turned and began walking home, the lights of the city glowing softly around him. In his pocket, he carried one of the first bracelets he ever made. the one Mr. Williams had helped him finish. It was a reminder that no act of kindness was ever wasted, that even the smallest spark could light someone's entire world. As he reached his house, his sisters ran out to greet him. Laughter echoing through the air, Amina stood at the door, her eyes filled with love and pride. Malik hugged them all tightly, the warmth of family wrapping around him like the embrace of destiny. That night, as they sat together for dinner under rice, beans, and bread just like old times, Malik closed his eyes and whispered a quiet prayer of thanks, not for wealth or success, but for kindness, for the power it had to change hearts, rewrite fates, and heal the world, because in the end, that was the truth of his story. Kindness had not just changed his life, it had created a ripple that would go on forever, reminding everyone who heard it that even one small act of love could feed generations to come. And so the boy who once shared his last meal had become the man who shared his light. His story was not about charity or luck. It was about faith and goodness, the kind that never fades, never ends, and never forgets.